Chrono Odyssey is a new, upcoming MMORPG from South Korean developer NPixel for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and Microsoft Windows. Initial previews are looking really good, but what do we actually know about it so far? Let's talk about it. The first trailer for Chrono Odyssey was initially shown in late 2020, and since then there's really not been a lot of new information, until recently. On May 3rd, the team dropped a new gameplay trailer showing off what looks to be several different classes, enemy types, and encounters you might run into in the game. Though nothing is named, we can speculate on a few things. At the start of the trailer, we see several different weapon types on mostly melee characters, such as a greatsword, dual axes, and a sword and shield. These are all likely some variation of the warrior class, possibly with something else like a berserker thrown in as well. We get to see the sword and shield class in action up against a very Dark Souls looking boss. And I don't just mean that aesthetically. Unlike a lot of other similar action MMOs that focus on fast-paced combat, Chrono Odyssey seems to at least mix it up a little bit and slow it down. In this clip, we can see the player patiently circling, waiting on the boss to move, dodging and blocking before going in for an attack in the very methodical way that we typically see in From Software and Souls-like games. In addition to these warrior-esque classes, we also get quick peeks of an archer class and several powerful-looking magic-based classes. I'm personally pretty excited for these just because magic combat often feels like more of a miss than a hit, and if these previews are anything to go by, the magic in Chrono Odyssey looks to be leaning more towards a hit. The last big things shown off in this newest trailer are a few things that are pretty important to a multiplayer RPG. We get to see a few group bosses that look like they might be dungeons or raids, as well as a massive world boss. It looks like the smaller boss fights consist of your typical 4-person party, but it's hard to tell just from this exactly what role everyone's going to be playing. The world boss, in comparison, is a size befitting a world boss, and it looks like legions of players are taking it on at the same time. In this part of the trailer, we get to see a little bit more of what some of the classes are going to be like the mage standing back and throwing their big spells, some sort of spear or lancer class getting some fun jumping attacks in, and another mage with some aura type abilities that look like it might be providing some support. That's mostly it for the actual gameplay shown in this trailer. We do get to see a couple more boss previews, but nothing much that we haven't seen already, other than the use of a certain powerful artifact that we'll get to in just a bit. Instead, at this point, I want to transition and focus on what we know about the lore and the setting of the game so far. From the Chrono Odyssey website, we know that the game takes place on a world called Satera. From the trailers and the concept art, we can tell that Satera is a beautiful world with vast, sprawling landscapes and hugely varying environments. Satera is also currently the front lines for the ongoing war against the Void, which has been raging since the beginning of time. This brings me to the next point. The 5 opposing powers that we'll encounter while exploring Satera. Since we've already name-dropped the Void, we might as well start there. As you might expect, the Void is a realization of nothingness and the cruel abyss, a completely enigmatic faction comprised of basically immortal, biometallic-looking monsters. The Void aims to consume and destroy everything. Satera is the ideal place for the frontlines to be, as the world naturally rejects the existence of the Void and limits their capabilities. An important part of this natural resistance are the Guardians. These greater powers on the world of Satera were called there by an ancient civilization known as the Great Ones, after the Guardians' own worlds were destroyed by the Void. These alien creatures are not necessarily friends, however, as they perceive the World Movers as a threat alongside the Void. The World Movers are us. Their homeworld was destroyed, but they managed to escape to Satera. These new inhabitants of Satera are blessed with incredible powers that allow them to work alongside their new home to push the Void back and hopefully end the eons-long war. A shared history does not necessarily mean that the World Movers are unified, however. Since arriving on Satera, they've split into 3 factions that, while sharing a common ultimate goal, compete between themselves for power, influence, rights, and their own interests. We don't currently have much information on these new factions, but I think it's safe to assume that we'll be able to pick which one we want to be a part of in the game. Other than these 3 primary factions, there are also the Outcasts. These are world movers who have been exiled for various heinous reasons and are now working against the interests of the main factions. From the descriptions we have, This is going to be a secondary antagonistic force to the Void in the game's story and could provide an interesting way to mix things up other than it always just being fight big monster. Lastly are the Broken. World movers who are corrupted by the Void and unable to resist the contamination become Broken, a group of violent undead that are desperately fighting against any living being to hopefully one day reclaim some semblance of the lives they've lost but are ultimately hopeless. Now that we've talked about CHRONO and all of the opposing forces, we need to touch a little bit on what we know regarding the Chronotector, the powerful artifact that I mentioned earlier. Not much is known about it other than that it was created by the Great Ones and that its primary purpose is to manipulate both space and time to the user's will. According to the website, the Chronotector has lost much of its original strength, but it is still capable of twisting time and space to create effects irreplicable by even the world's most powerful magic. It looks like this artifact is going to afford us a bit of a unique edge in combat, as we've seen in the recent gameplay trailer, and will probably serve a pretty massive point in the story, considering that conflicting timelines are another feature present on the world of CHRONO, possibly due to the Void's influence and the eons-old existence of the Chronotector. So that's really most of what we know right now. We can make guesses about what classes will be available, how content's going to be structured, character creation, things like that all day, but in the end, we just don't have that much information yet. I'm personally very cautiously excited about this one. Seems like tons of MMOs have been promised over the last decade just to disappear or release to pretty bad initial reception, but it seems like the developers are putting a lot of time into this. There's also a chance that it's a pretty good game, but it's filled with pay-to-win features and pointless grinding, but again, we really just won't know that until it releases. For now, it looks like it could be what MMO players have been asking for such a long time. What do you think? Is Chrono Odyssey on your radar at all, or are you expecting another commercial MMO flop? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for checking out the video. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so that you can be notified of my next upload, and I'll see you in the next one.